Hello, and welcome to the Quietly Visible podcast. I'm your host, Carol Stewart, founder of Abounding Solutions and author of Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman. And this is the podcast for introverted women who want to thrive as leaders and in life. Now, today I have with me a very esteemed guest. Her name is Melissa DinWiddie, sorry. And she's on a mission to help leaders and teams turn the impossible into reality by uncovering their creative potential. She's a Juilliard-trained dancer, professional artist for 15 years, a jazz singer, songwriter, and performing improviser. And she brings a wealth of creative experiences to her work with companies like Google, Meta, and Salesforce. And as the author of The Creative Sandbox Way, she's passionate about showing people how to embrace play, imperfection, and experimentation as tools for innovation. So we're going to be having a very interesting conversation. Particularly, we're going to be looking at how even the most analytical and risk-averse professionals can unlock their bold creativity and innovation simply by changing their relationship with perfection. And this is something that I often see in introverted women leaders, that perfectionism tendency. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So hello, Melissa, and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Carol.
It's great to have you here. So before we begin, just tell us a bit about who Melissa is, beyond what I've just said.
Let's see. Well, I do identify as an introvert. I have tested as an INFJ on the Myers-Briggs. Let's see, on Strengths Finder, I am connectedness is my top strength. I also let's see, trying to remember all my Strengths Finder strengths. I'm a positivity, futuristic. Trying to remember what else. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think, like, who am I? Well, when I tell people who I am, I typically go through sort of the list of the things that you shared, but what most people don't know from that list of all the, this creative background is that I spent a good chunk of my life, about 15 years, believing that I was a non-creative person.
Okay.
So yeah, and I typically get like the head tilt, or the lines between the eyes when people hear that, because hearing all these like ways that I've been creative and all the oh my gosh, you're such a creative person, how could you believe that you're not creative? But I really did. I spent from age 13 to age 28 just to my core believing that I was not creative. And I look back at that time, and of course that was actually the period of my life where I was a dancer, and I also was exceeding, getting A's in college and writing essays, but I didn't identify those things as creativity.
Okay. So not even the dancing. You didn't identify as creativity.
It's like, okay, well, that maybe, in this particular realm, yeah, maybe I could see myself as creative, but outside of that, no.
Mm-hmm.
And academia is this very strange sort of animal where the goal is to please a single authority figure, the teacher, in order to get the good grade. And I was really good at figuring out what I needed to do in order to get the good grade, which in itself is creative, but it doesn't encourage you to go outside of those parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't get a lot of training in the realms in which I was operating to, as they say, think outside the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really did not identify as a creative.
Mm. Um,
Um, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry, go on. Go on.
Oh, I was just so all of that is to say that now I really relate to the people that I work with. Primarily I'm operating in the corporate world or
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit sphere or whatever. And so I encounter people all the time who tell me, oh, I'm not the creative type. I'm not creative, because they're not, painting or making music or,
Mm-hmm.
that very small part of the world that we label as creativity, artistic, whatever. Um, and we equate creativity with drawing, with painting, with making music, but that's such a small part of the world. And also, just because you can draw does not necessarily mean that you're actually being creative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is something that I can relate to because I never used to think of myself as creative as a child or even as a teenager. That it's only as I became an adult and I found that I because I used to associate creativity with, like you said, being able to draw good or being able to paint or that sort of thing. But that wasn't me. But I am creative in different ways in creating like ideas and putting things together. That's where my creativity lies. So, at what point did you recognize that you are creative?
That's a really great question, actually. Well, so for me, there's always been this tension and sort of continuing relationship between the identity of creativity and identity as an artist and
Mm-hmm.
artistic creativity. Uh, and I still have that little gremlin. I use these little finger puppets in my uh, in the retreats that I run, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to talk about that little voice in your head. The self criticism, the self judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I still have those little voices that tell me, oh, you're not creative, you're not good enough. I still have those voices. They don't go away. Uh, and for me, in my late 20s, I came back my to art. I didn't do any art. And I'm bringing this up because creativity and art are not the same thing. But for me, coming back to art after not doing any art for 15 years, from age 13 to age 28, that was really significant
Mm-hmm.
because uh, for me, it really helped me identify as, oh, I am a creative person, to be able to come back to the art that I didn't allow myself to make any art really for 15 years because I thought, well, that's for other people. That's for people who, are going to do it in a professional capacity, are going to do it at a level that I'm never going to be able to do it. And then, of course, ironically, I ended up becoming a professional artist. But uh, but I needed to allow myself to lower the bar
Mm-hmm.
and to just play and to just have a relationship with artistic expression, um, in order to come back to it. I'd taken an art class. I've done lots of art when I was very young and
Mm-hmm.
loved it. But then I had put so much pressure on myself to be amazing, to be really good, I'd gotten caught up in what I call the comparison trap.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not nearly as good as that person, therefore I suck, therefore I can't possibly do this thing. I was in an art class at age 13 with adults, and compared my work to other people's work and thought, I just suck at this. I can't possibly do this. And I just stopped. And for 15 years, I didn't make any art. Well, I mean, occasionally maybe opened up a sketchbook or something like that. But I basically didn't do any art for 15 years. And then I finally came back to it in a very exploratory, playful, I would call it now, looking back, I would call it a creative sandbox. Like a little kid, just like, what might I do with this? How might I play with this? And it was, I equate it now to that moment in The Wizard of Oz, the film The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy goes from black and white to Technicolor in Oz. And it was like my life opened up again. And so that moment was really like getting my creativity back. So for me, it was that moment of allowing exploration. For me, it was in the form of art, but it doesn't have to be art. But that's the form that it came for me. Seeing myself as a creative person again. Right. And so that really opened up, and it also overlapped with business, because I ended up turning that into, it just sort of fell backwards into becoming a business. It started off as a little hobby business, and then it ended up becoming how I made my living. And that, if you've ever run a business, is an incredibly creative act. You have to be incredibly creative in order to run a business. And so that opened up an entire new sort of realm for me. And that was really exciting to be able to use all, like different parts of how I think and how I could try different things and experiment, and just sort of being able to see different possibilities for myself, and use different ways of thinking. So for example, I'm sort of a right brain person, but I also have this left brain side of myself. I loved learning new technologies and learning how to create a website for myself, and all of this sort of technical sides of running a business that I hadn't thought of myself as being that kind of a person. I hadn't thought of myself as having those, I don't know, those interests or skill sets, but I love climbing learning curves. And so that was fun for me. And seeing that, oh yeah, I have that creativity as well. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. Yeah. And was there a pivotal moment that made you decide to explore and go into the sandbox again? Or was it just a gradual thing?
Having to take myself back there. Well, at the time, I was pretty lost back when I was getting back into my art, and I had time on my hands as well. So in that sense, there was sort of a combination of factors happening at one time. So yeah, and I had just gotten married. So yes, it was definitely a pivotal moment in that regard. It was a major transition in my life. And yeah, I just remember that particular moment in time when I was about 28, when I was getting back into art. And then when I really turned my art into a business, when I really decided to go for it, was when I got divorced. And I had to
another pivotal moment.
It was a big pivotal moment, and I had to fish or cut bait. I had to decide, do I At that point, my art business was really just a hobby business. And I was making enough money to pay for my classes and my conferences and my supplies, but not enough to make a living. And so I had to decide, do I go get, a real job that's going to pay the bills, or do I turn this into a going concern that's going to pay the bills? And honestly, at the time, I didn't have enough confidence to think that I could get a job that was going to pay the bills. I probably could have if I had the confidence to do it. But I thought, I think I can turn this business into something that will actually pay the bills. So, yeah, it was definitely a pivotal moment for sure.
Yeah. and that says something about, when you're going through stuff, that curiosity and exploration, how that can lead to discovering new things about ourselves and tapping into that creativity, which I think is a good lesson for listeners to take away, actually.
Yeah, and there's something about, when you're in some kind of a, pivotal or crisis moment that can force you to try things that you wouldn't otherwise try.
Definitely. And so before we sort of look at the creativity and tapping into that and perfectionism, what, as a performer, introverted, who's in the spotlight, which can be energy draining, energy depleting for introverted, and then someone who's introverted, how did you manage during that period um to sort of be a performer and performing constantly?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about back when I was a dancer, the performances were sort of few and far between. And then when I was performing a lot as a jazz singer, there was a period where I had a weekly gig at a restaurant, and then I would get gigs, whenever I could get them. And it's a real thing. I love being on stage, and I'm definitely, on the one hand, it feeds me. And people are always so surprised to find out that I'm an introvert because I love being on stage. And it does feed me. And also in the work that I do with companies, I'm at the front of the room. Whether I'm keynote speaking or facilitating, I'm the one holding the space, whether it's in front of a team of 6 or an audience of 300, whatever. I'm the one with the microphone in the front, essentially, whether it's a physical microphone or not, I'm the one holding the space in the front of the room. And people are shocked. They argue with me when I tell them I'm an introvert. Now, to be fair, I am not as far over on the introvert spectrum as my husband is. He's much more of an introvert than I am. But after an event, I am definitely I'm like emotionally nourished and physically drained.
Yeah.
So I've learned that like immediately after I'm high, I have this sort of high, but then I get sort of a crash. So that typically happens like anywhere from a half an hour to an hour after the event. And so I have to sort of build in time to, go home, make sure that I get enough sleep, make sure that I have time to go be alone, or chill with, 1 or 2 people or something like that. And the reality is, Carol, that I work alone. I work at home, I work alone. I spend, 95% of my time alone, and I'm
Mm.
perfectly happy to do that. And then I go and I'm in front of, a big crowd or a small group of people or something like that in the work that I do. And that's a really good balance for me. But I
Mm.
have to make sure that I build in, like if I'm at a conference or something and I'm speaking, I can't go straight to some kind of after party because that is not going to work for my
Mm.
nervous system.
And that is so important for introverts to be aware of that. It's, it highlights what you said about people thinking that, or surprised that you're introvert, highlights the misconceptions that people have about introversion, because introversion doesn't mean that someone doesn't like being on stage performing. It just means that being in the spotlight a lot, where there's a lot of external stimulation going on, can be draining. So it's important to build in that recharge and recovery time afterwards, like how you
Yeah.
recognized. Mm.
Yeah. I think, like, for me, if I'm on stage with the microphone, I feel much more in control. And even if I'm an improviser as well, so I perform with an improv group, and I would rather, and that's, I don't have a script. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
that's very, takes a lot of energy, but I would rather do that. I would rather be on stage doing that than, for example, at, some kind of a huge, loud cocktail party where I don't know anybody and I have to work
Mm-hmm.
the room. I can do that. Nobody would know that I feel really uncomfortable and awkward inside because I've learned how to present really well in those kinds of scenarios, but I do not enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it's very draining.
And I can relate to that as well. And what you said about the high, I can, that's something that I can relate, because I like speaking, public speaking. I enjoy it. I enjoy going to events where, there may be, I'm speaking and then speaking to people after, but then after that, there comes that high becomes a fall or a low sort of thing. And
Yeah.
that's when I need that recharge recovery time. I never used to really understand what that was. I would just be, have a high of being somewhere or doing something, and then just feeling a bit drained after. And I'd think, oh, what's going on? But as I got to understand introversion better and know myself better, I recognize, and I call
Yeah.
it introvert drain.
Yeah. It's so helpful to understand that because then you
Mm.
can kind of build in some scaffolding for it. So it's
Hmm.
not so exhausting. I mean, it
Yeah,
still can be tiring, but at least I don't know, you can set yourself up for success better.
that's right. Yes. Uh-huh. And so, sort of looking at perfectionism, and something that I see with a lot of the introverted women that I coach, that they have a tendency for perfectionism. Um, and I'm just wondering, based on what you said earlier about perfectionism, was that something that you used to experience?
Oh my
Uh,
God. I feel like I was a dyed in the wool perfectionist. I mean, of course that can't be true because nobody's born a perfectionist. You've got somehow it's got to be like trained into you or something. I don't know exactly how it got trained into me, but I remember pretty young being, I don't know, it certainly as early as high school, probably much earlier than that. I
mhm,
just such perfectionist tendencies so young, and that's something. So here's an example. I remember being on a bus ride on a senior cut day. So that some of the seniors organized in my senior class, my high school class, organized a senior cut day to go to the beach. And this is near the end of school, and I was sitting next to a friend of mine, and she reached down and like scratched an itch on her leg or something, and she said, "Oh my God, I realized I forgot to shave one of my legs. And she said it really loud. And then she said, like, so that everybody could hear, oh my God, everybody, I forgot to shave one of my legs. I was so horrified. I could not believe that she was saying this so that everybody could hear. If that had been me, I would have hidden it. I never would have told anybody. I was just like, I can't believe she's telling people this. The same bus ride, the same trip to the beach. This was when I was so body conscious. I think this was when I was just starting to become I had an eating disorder, and I don't remember if I became bulimic, and I don't know if I was bulimic yet, but I was a dancer at this point, and I was starting to get like really, really disordered in my eating. And we got to the beach. It was a very hot day, which wasn't always common in the beach where I lived in California. It was often quite overcast and cold. On hot summer days would actually be cold at the coast, but it was hot and sunny. And the only long sleeve top that I had with me was a sweatshirt, a hot sweatshirt. And I ate so much, and I was so self-conscious about my protruding belly that I refused to take off my sweatshirt because I did not want anyone to see my imperfect protruding belly. So the entire day I was completely miserable because I didn't want anyone to see my imperfect body shape. Meanwhile, everybody else around me was having a fantastic time, parading around with their normal imperfect bodies. And my friend, who had a very imperfect body, was happily parading around, frolicking with her one unshaven leg. And I was so miserable because I was so self-conscious of my, and I had this cute little, 17-year-old body. And it's like the perfectionism just had me so miserable and so tied up in knots. And the whole time that I had my art career, the perfectionism kept me so paralyzed. I had my art career for 15 years, my art business. And for at least a decade of that time, I almost never made any art for myself. And the reason, Carol, is because I would get so paralyzed because I had this story in my head that everything that I made had to be amazing. Also, I felt like everything I made had to make money because, I had to pay the bills. And so the story was that everything had to be amazing, had to be able to make money. And so what I ended up doing was, I just wouldn't make anything rather than saying, just crank some stuff out. Just let it be crappy because we need the crap to fertilize the good stuff, which is what I figured out later when I finally was like, I have to get back to making art. And the only way to get back to it is to, get into the mind space of being a little kid again. And that's when I finally figured out, I figured out how to get back into making art, which is, through play, getting back into the mind space of being a little kid again. And I developed ultimately, first, it was a handful of little sort of rules for myself, which expanded into the 10 guideposts that form the backbone of my book, The Creative Sandbox Way. But it took me a long time. And so for 10 years, I was utterly miserable while I was, quote unquote, living the dream, making a living as an artist, but, only making art for other people, never making art for myself.
Wow. And so how did you, so having gone through that process and having identified how you got yourself through that process, how would you advise someone who is risk averse, who says that they're not creative, and over analytical, perfectionist, to tap into that playful side of them so that they are able to work with that perfectionism so that it doesn't hold them back, keep them stuck? And isn't stressful, because it is stressful.
It's hugely stressful. Yeah. So, it's a process. And for me, obviously everyone's mileage is going to vary, but for me, it's an ongoing process. And it took years I remember from the first time that I sort of formed the intention to let go of my perfectionism
Mm-hmm.
to when to now, or to when I started to feel the sort of the layers of the onion start to peel away. And it's layers. But I remember the first time that I formed that intention, and my fear, Carol, was that if I let go of the perfectionism, it would mean settling. It would mean letting go of excellence. That holding on to perfectionism was what was enabling me to pursue excellence, to be as good at what I am good at as I am. And that if I let go of the perfectionism, that I would be mediocre, that I would not be able to be as as good that I would. Does that make sense? Like that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that I had so much fear around that. I think I don't know about other people, but I know for me that it's so important to me to be good at what I do. And excellence is a value of mine. And
Mm-hmm.
Perfection is not, nobody's ever going to be perfect.
No, no,
And I
nobody is.
certainly understand that, but I do want to be as good as possible, as excellent as I can be. And so I think so much of perfectionism is the attempt at mastery, at excellence. And so how do you sort of navigate that line and understanding the difference between
Mm.
perfectionism and the pursuit of excellence? And they are different. And so
Yes.
really understanding the difference first was key. And then letting go of the perfectionism. One of the really big things for me was understanding the concept of self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody introduced me to that maybe 15 or 20 years ago. And that was a very powerful concept in my journey. Really understanding and studying the concept of self-compassion and really embracing that and taking that on. And then I now have what I call a golden formula, which
Mm-hmm.
is self-awareness plus self-compassion equals the key to everything good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've always been a very self-aware person ever since I was a little kid. So that part I already had kind of dialed in.
Uh-huh.
But the self-compassion piece was a new thing for me. And
Mm-hmm.
really that, I highly recommend the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, who is the world's foremost authority on self-compassion. She's a researcher on self-compassion. And self-compassion comes down to three components. The first is mindfulness, which is really the ability to step outside of the distress, whatever's happening, and separate yourself from it and observe, like, oh, what's going on here? And the second piece is an awareness of common humanity. You're not the first person who's
Mm-hmm.
ever experienced something like this, whatever you're experiencing, like, oh, I blew it, this thing just happened, I blew it, I can't believe I did that, whatever it is. You're not the first person who's experienced that. It's happened many times. Other people have experienced something very similar. You're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's the common humanity piece. And then the third piece is self-kindness, the ability to soothe yourself, physically soothe yourself, to say, it's okay, Melissa, you're okay. It's okay. To forgive yourself for being human.
Mm-hmm.
So those three pieces together make up self-compassion. And the practice of being able to do that is so powerful. And just the ability to notice what just happened. Notice I something happened. I did something, I made a mistake. I, whatever it is, I blew my diet. Whatever. Just
Uh-huh.
notice it. A thing just happened that you're having feelings about. Step outside of it. Acknowledge that you're not the only person that had that thing happen, and be kind to yourself as a result of it. It's transformational. That is life changing. So if I had been able to do that, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, perhaps my life would have been a lot less painful.
But then at the same time, all of it has led to where you are now, and then you can take that
Absolutely.
experience and use that to help other people that are going through
Exactly. Oh,
similar
absolutely. I
experiences.
don't regret it, because
Mm,
I do feel that all the things that have happened to me, all the pains that I have been through, have led me to be able to have the empathy, to be able to do the work that I do now to help
mm.
other people. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a saying, your test becomes your testimony. And so, what you've been through is now your testimony, because you're able to use that in a very positive way. Even though as
Absolutely.
painful as it may have been at the time, that you've got through it, and it will show other people that they can too.
Yes. I
Mm,
believe that so strongly.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Uh-huh. And that self-compassion is so important. And I think particularly now, I'm seeing so many women who are experiencing burnout and stress, and um, who have perfectionist tendencies where everything has to be perfect before they move, before they make decisions, which adds to the stress of everything. So that
Yeah.
self-compassion is important. It really
Yeah. I
is.
actually call myself now an intentional imperfectionist,
Hmm.
which does not mean that I'm, sloppy. It actually just means it's the same thing as having self-compassion.
Hmm.
It means
Hmm.
that I allow myself to lower the bar so that I can take risks, so that I can try things, so that I can, instead of saying, no, I'm never going to do that because, I can't allow myself to, show anybody that I'm not a robot, it means that I get to try things. I get to be human and forgive myself for being human, and to have self-compassion.
Yeah, and that is a much better way to
Oh my God.
live.
The grass is so much greener on this side.
It really is. So thank you so much for sharing. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I'm sure the listeners will get great value from it, particularly hearing about your journey and also about how to apply self-compassion, so that they can apply it for themselves. So thank you very much.
Carol,
And
thank you so much.
if people want to find out more about you, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, you can find me on my website, which is my name, melissadinwiddie.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, also at my name, Melissa DinWiddie. You can find me on YouTube, again at my name, Melissa DinWiddie. And you can find me on Instagram. This one breaks the pattern. My Instagram handle is at a underscore creative underscore life. And I also created, just for your listeners, a free cheat sheet to jumpstart your next big idea, because the fastest way to create the impossible, it's my tagline, create the impossible, is to start messy and learn fast. So I created a cheat sheet called the Impact Innovation Checklist, and you can get that at bit.ly/QVP thank you, all lowercase. That's for Quietly Visible Podcast. QVP thank you. bit.ly/QVP thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And listeners, do go check that out. We will put the links in the show notes, so to make it easy for people to go and access it. Sounds like a great resource, so thank you.
You bet, Carol.
Yes, so thank you very much for coming on the show. So listeners, if you're listening, if you're watching, then do go and check Melissa out and download her cheat sheet and put it into use. And thank you for listening. And if you are looking to increase your confidence, influence and impact, and you haven't completed the free assessment on my website, go to aboundingsolutions.com. There's a free assessment there that you can complete that will give you ideas about areas that you can focus on. And so until the next time, bye.